Hello, School Transportation Nation. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tony Corbin, publisher and president of School Transportation News, and this episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, and School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications, and Bluebird, who had some really exciting news last week. I caught up with their president, Britton Smith, for an interview, and it's an exclusive, guys. You may have read the story on stnonline.com. Big safety news. Ryan Gray and I are going to be breaking it down right after the interview with Britton. So guys, listen up, take it in. It's big stuff. But before we get to that interview, we got a quick message. Do you remember a time when you could just cherry pick the best solution to run your school transportation operation? The best routing software may be one company. The best parent app could be another company. Those days are over. TransFinder said the old way of doing business doesn't work for today's busy and burdened school transportation departments. They need one partner, one solution. TransFinder has embraced this approach for years now, building award-winning solutions like Route Finder Plus, the driver app Wayfinder, parent app Stop Finder, and inventory management solution Service Finder. They also have field trip management solutions, Trip Finder, and Viewfinder, which provide critical routing information to other stakeholders in the district. Add to this TransFinder's award-winning hardware and industry's best support and service. You have the ingredients that make up one partner, one solution. It's not just a slogan. It's TransFinder's way of doing business. Learn more by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or calling 800-373-3609. That's 800-373-3609. Remember, one partner, one solution. All right, School Transportation Nation, we have a special guest for you this week. I have Britton Smith, president of Bluebird. They made a huge announcement last week out in Westfield, Indiana at IMMI's facility, and it was a big safety move, a big move for the industry. Britton, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be here. And as you mentioned, really a historic time last week and a big announcement for Bluebird. We're really trying to take safety to the next level. And we're honored to take that position.
Yeah, so Britton's team and the folks at IMMI, for those of you that maybe didn't see, hosted a safety event where they were demonstrating some new technology as well as planting the flag in the ground for a big announcement. So seatbelts on all new Bluebird school buses at no additional cost. That is a bold move, Britton. What drove you guys to do that at Bluebird?
Yeah, look, so this is not a new debate. We've been talking about seatbelts on school buses for quite some time now. And frankly, the Safety Administration across the board, NHTSA, NTSB, and others, have really been calling for seatbelts as standard. But obviously, they don't make all the rules, and I think they've really been looking for an OEM to step up and really plant the flag, as you say it, and make that bold move. We've been working with IMI for some time on this project, and really with their partnership, we're able to offer. We've selected IMI as our premium seat supplier, and whether you purchase a Bluebird school bus with or without seatbelts, as long as it's spec'd to the IMI seats, it costs the same. So we think that'll help overcome the cost barrier, which is probably the biggest one that the school districts mention. But frankly, the time is now, right? I mean, I think seatbelts are standard on everything on the highway except for school buses. So to me, it's a vital piece of safety equipment. The school bus itself is already built safe, right? I mean, it's built like a tank and it protects the occupants, but you need to keep them in place. You need to keep them in the bus, and seatbelts are the best way to do that.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the benefit of having it done at the factory? Because, when we were at the event last week, people were saying it's a complete package versus what's out there in the market now, which is kind of a different offering. So can you give a little scope to the increased safety or being built on the line at Bluebird?
Yeah, and obviously, having something that's factory built on the OEM, so not retrofitted, you're going to get the highest quality. The first quality. In some schools and some states are putting in lap belt ready or kind of convertible seats, which are good. But our position is that getting it straight from the factory is the best way to go, and gives you that OEM quality. And I think one of the things that folks will see, especially this summer when they visit STN Expo West, you'll see our bus on display with the IMI seats, and those seats the quality is unbelievable. The seat belts are well integrated, and they really are the safest thing out there. So obviously that's where we think the customers and dealers are going to be very excited about it.
So another product that was launched was a safety solution for the driver. And it's interesting because we haven't seen a ton of kind of modern safety solutions come out like this, right? So you have an airbag solution for a frontal crash for drivers. And during the I'm in My Bluebird event last week, you guys did a crash test demonstration, which I've seen a few of them, but it always is very jarring. You hear it. It's very visceral, right? It's very impactful. And I shared it on social media with my followers, and definitely we got a lot of reaction from people out there. You couldn't quite see the airbag deploy from where we were standing, but when they did the recap video, you saw kind of a slow-mo of how this deployed and hit the crashes. I mean, it was really impressive, Britton. I have to say, what was the driving factor for you guys to introduce airbag technology into Bluebird school buses?
Yeah, and maybe first a comment about the crash test. That was my first time. We had a truck impacting a bus, a Type C for folks who saw it, and they were going about 40 miles an hour. And what's really amazing to me is when you look at the construction of the bus, everything from the driver back the passenger cabin was entirely intact. The truck, on the other hand, did not do as well. So it really just goes to how well built Bluebird's school buses are. And that was sort of the first thing that hit me. Obviously, the impact of the crash, you can really feel it as you're standing there. And it was pretty striking to see that in person. But then when you walk up close, what's amazing to me is you see the driver, they had discharged an airbag. As you walk up, you see the driver is exactly where they were. Looked like no injuries. Obviously, it was a dummy, but and then you watch the video from inside of the cabin, and you see how well protected the driver is, and the lower G forces that are on the driver. And so in our research, we found that airbags reduce the risk of injury to a driver by 82%. So, I mean, Tony, that's a significant number. I mean, we're talking about a real risk reduction of injury for that driver. And to me, it's amazing that school buses are one of those pieces of equipment which is not required, but Bluebird's leading the way. 2025, these are going to be standard on all of our buses, and I'm very excited to be setting that standard. And I think drivers need that protection, right? I mean, the first line of defense in the case of an accident, they can go help out the students. And that's what every driver wants to do, is they want to be able to take care of the kids, and we want to help them do that.
So what was the reaction you had from the audience? Obviously, there was a large crowd you had invited of customers, dealers, private fleet operators, public school districts to witness this crash test demonstration and this launch of all these safety equipment. What was the feedback that you got?
Well, so I got to tell you, it was first in the crash test. Everyone was just awestruck, to witness something like that. Obviously, folks see pictures, but until you see it in person, you really don't get an appreciation for the impact and the forces that are at play. The second piece is then when you see the video and you see what happens inside the cabin for the bus driver behind the airbag and the students, whether they were in place or out of place, so they got compartmentalization or not, or whether they were wearing their seatbelt, you really get an appreciation on how much protection the seatbelt provides. And then obviously the other safety features that we introduced in terms of lighting, make the bus more visible, collision mitigation systems to avoid accidents to begin with, right? Everyone is so excited because we're taking safety to the next level. this is the next evolution. And Bluebird, it's in our DNA to lead on safety. So I think setting that standard, I think the feedback has been so positive because folks understand that Bluebird leads the way and the other OEMs follow. And frankly, I'm excited for that day when the other OEMs develop the airbags and when the other OEMs announce, seatbelts as standard. I think that's where we need to be. And I look forward to everyone else coming along with us.
Yeah, that's exciting. Now, one of the other questions I had while I was at the event, I know the guys at Microbird were there as well. And I had asked, hey, are we going to maybe see this technology maybe matriculate into Microbird? And I know it takes time with an OEM to take this technology and move it through the whole portfolio. So as of now, this is Type C and Type D buses, correct?
Yeah, but just to be clear, so Type A buses are built on Ford and GM chassis. So they already have airbags, right? And a lot of the other electronic systems kind of poured over already. So it's a little bit easier on those. So, they're, I think, less of a concern for us. And the Type C and Type D are ones where there's been a bit of a void, both from a regulatory as well as an innovation standpoint.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, those are very interesting safety moves that you've made. The big question I have is how will everyone else react, right? In terms of the other manufacturers, time will tell, right? Does everybody else offer these products standard? Do they not? Is Bluebird pioneering the way? Absolutely. It's a historic moment for an OEM to come out like yourself and make that move and say that. I know you're a father of 3 and your kids are a little more grown up now. They're out of the school age, but I think as a dad and as a parent, you look back and you say, wow, I'm doing the right thing. I think as a human being, we're doing the right thing that's socially responsible for our company to help really impact safety of children. And I'd really like to congratulate you and commend your team for making this decision. I know it's difficult to make because obviously these are business decisions as well because of the cost factor of this, but to offer it at no additional cost to your customers creates a lot of loyalty. It creates a really great opportunity to build with customers. And we've found that safety is always paramount, right? I know there's a lot of action, especially around green energy, the stuff that you guys are very active in, but it all comes back to safety. It all comes back to the kids. So really great stuff, Britton. Any other kind of big things we can expect for Bluebird? Obviously, this was a big announcement. We got SCN Expo in Reno coming up in less than 30 days. So it's coming really soon. Any big surprises people can expect or see you?
Well, Tony, I can't show all my cards at once. So you'll have to wait for the next big announcement. Obviously a lot more great stuff to come. And I do appreciate it. Look, we've thrown down the gauntlet. I want to say that we want all the other OEMs to follow. We want to transform the student transportation industry. And, we want to take care of the most precious cargo out there, which is our children. So, thanks for your support and, look forward to seeing how everyone else reacts.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing a little bit. And I'm sure we'll unpack the event a little more a little later on the podcast as well. But it was great having you. Good seeing you. And we'll see you soon in Reno.
Thanks, Tony. See you soon.
All right, we're back, Ryan. Really great interview with Britton Smith. Lots to say, man. I mean, I was out there in Westfield, Indiana to watch Bluebird's crash test demonstration at the IMMI facility called CAPE, which is the Center for Advanced Product Evaluation. We've demonstrated a few crashes, or they've demonstrated a few crashes with us in collaboration with SCN Expo East. And so this was a real treat. It's always very jarring to watch. And so we started off at their conference center, Ryan, and they had a few people come up. They had a big group of safety professionals there. NHTSA was there, Traffic Highway Safety Administration, former administrator Mark Rosekind. So I thought, okay, this is definitely safety driven. IMMI, known for safety, occupant restraints. So not surprising, Britton Smith goes on stage, makes the announcement. Bluebird goes all in with seatbelts, 3-point lap shoulder belts on all new Bluebird school buses, pretty much starting in October of 2024 and at no additional cost, which I was quite surprised with to hear that. What was your reaction, Ryan?
It was surprising, but then when I thought about it, I thought, this makes complete sense. We were talking before you were planning to head out there, and wondering what might be the announcement. And it makes complete sense. Obviously, IMMI, Safeguard, one of the leaders in school bus seating and seat restraints. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. Some folks I've talked to who are seatbelt proponents have said, they thought that eventually some horrific crash was going to happen that was going to force the hand of an OEM because of the liability and the lawsuits. And here we have Bluebird being proactive. I mean, this is not the first time. Certainly with electronic stability controls, they were the first in the industry to bring that out. And now here we are with lap shoulder belts. Certainly, like you said, no additional cost. That's what really stood out to me, because we know that depending on the size of the bus, the passenger capacity, it can range from anywhere between 3,500, 5,000 on up, 7,000, as high as 10,000. So that's a substantial cost that Bluebird is shouldering. But to the point again of the liability, and Britton spoke to this, that essentially, the Bluebird believes the right thing to do in this day and age, especially with all of the federal recommendations, NTSB, certainly NHTSA. Well, NHTSA, required lap shoulder belts in smaller Type A school buses under Dr. Mark Rosekind. So when I saw that he was there, that made complete sense as well. But at the time, NHTSA said, hey, we're not going to mandate for large school buses, but they recommend it. We have the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services that have a position where they favor lap shoulder belts if a school district or a state can find the budget for it. The other associations, NAPT, National Association for Pupil Transportation, and National School Transportation Association, the contractor side, they are more hesitant, more reticent on lap shoulder seatbelts for a lot of the reasons that you hear, cost being the main thing. There's still a lot of discussion about reduced capacity. I had a couple conversations out at Indianapolis last week at STN Expo East regarding that, and folks are just dead set against it. So we still have the folks that are, either for it or against it. But certainly, this moves the needle from Bluebird. Like you said, a historic announcement. People always ask me, outside of the industry, when they find out what I do, one of the first questions is, why don't school buses have seatbelts? Well, now Bluebirds will. Now, again, customers can specify not to have them, but it, will really be interesting to see now what the other OEMs do in response.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. It to me, it also becomes, like you said, there are people that believe that the driver is really the only one that should be belted. Now, we've seen from the Cape demonstrations, and now this would be my third time seeing a crash test demonstration. They get high-speed footage of these crashes, right? And the bus wasn't moving, right? It's stationary and it's being hit by a box truck. So to kind of set this up for you guys, if you've never seen the crash test demonstration done, if you go on my social media, you find me, Tony Corpin, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I'm on there, and I have a video of this crash test demonstration. You can always check that out. And we also have a story on the STN website, stnonline.com. But in essence, when you're here, there is a long runway, kind of like a sled area, that a vehicle gets pulled down the sled at a speed. So the truck, as Britton mentioned in his interview, was running at 40 miles an hour and the bus was stationary. But in a real world environment, chances are the bus is not stationary. It's moving. And then you have to amplify the amount of speed. So if one vehicle is moving at 40, another moving at 30, right? There's a math equation there for the amount of force that's generated within the crash itself. So it will be interesting to see I think downstream, the safety implications of having belted children. Now, Safeguard demonstrates different children of different sizes, different age categories. Some children are in integrated child safety seats, other are in other types of products that would be more child restraint products that would be kind of in more of an aftermarket, not integrated into the seat. And then the 3-point belts themselves, just to see how different occupants react during different types of crashes, right? And as we've seen with NHTSA, they'll get involved with different types of crashes. We saw the crash down at Hayes ISD in near Austin, where a bus was almost struck head on by a truck and was able to veer to the right, and it ended up being a glancing blow, almost very similar in this situation, except that bus flipped over because of the rate of speed, and a child was ejected and died. Now, if there were seatbelts in there or integrated child restraint systems that the children were restrained properly, that death is probably avoided, Ryan, right? Don't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's been the discussion that we've had with folks in the industry, and certainly what is driving a session coming up in a couple weeks out in Reno. Two of our child safety restraint specialists, Denise Donaldson from Safe Ride News and Sue Schutrump, one of our TSD tenured faculty, they're doing a session on Sunday, July 14th, that essentially looks at that issue and why aren't all preschoolers in child safety restraints on school buses. This is basically the title of that session. And we know that for the most part, the first 2 rows, that's where these child safety restraint systems are for the preschoolers. But when you have a full bus, like at Hayes, a field trip of however, I think it was like 60 kids or something like that, and they were all like preschoolers, 3 to 5 years old. And they were in a bus, again, that was one of the older buses and was one of the dozen or so left in the fleet that didn't have any seatbelts in them. So, of course, Texas is one of the states that mandates. But we know that it's not enough to put a lap shoulder belt or certainly a lap belt on a preschooler. They're too small. They need to be in a CSRS, child safety restraint system, whether that be an integrated seat, some kind of, we don't put booster seats on school buses, so it shouldn't be a booster seat, or it could potentially be a forward-facing car seat. But that obviously brings a lot of logistical and budget challenges to school districts. How do you I'm not aware of anyways. I'm sure you can get this from one of the OEMs where a bus has integrated child safety seats in every seating position. So if you have 20 or 30 rows, that every one of them has it. So that's a logistical challenge, but something that school districts really need to get in front of, because as we saw with the Hayes crash, we have these young children that are riding en masse in school buses, especially as we're looking at universal kindergarten in a lot of states. There's more and more preschoolers, certainly Head Start students that a lot of school districts are transporting. So that is something that student transporters, they need to think about, they need to plan for. If they know that they're going to be transporting a large number of preschoolers, they need to make sure that these students are protected. These children are protected in the age-appropriate restraint system. And certainly just putting them on a school bus without any restraint is not good. But it can also have very ill effects if they do put them in a lap shoulder belt. And that's where I hear some of the arguments like, oh, it can choke the kids or give them neck abrasions. Well, yeah, if it's not appropriate for them to be wearing that kind of restraint system, yeah, that's what's going to happen. So a lot more logistical and budgetary issues to wrap your head around. But this industry is predicated on safety. We always talk about it, and everyone in the industry talks about, safety first. Well, is it really? So that's something that kind of a come to Jesus moment. Look yourself in the mirror. But certainly with this Bluebird announcement, definitely just in the larger sense of lap shoulder belts, again, a historic moment. And now, Tony, in addition to the lap shoulder belts, there was other technology. So it wasn't simply an announcement about lap shoulder belts.
Yes, there was, Ryan. But before we get to those, we got a quick message. Hey guys, are reliable radio communications in your school buses important to you? The laws against using cell phones while operating commercial vehicles are in place for the safety and security of both your drivers and your students. Taking that risk comes with a hefty fine, penalties, and even disqualification of the driver's CDL. School radio specializes in providing wide area, push-to-talk, two-way radio solutions for schools and school transportation that are fully compliant with all hands-free operation laws. They offer a managed service program that includes the device, all services, all maintenance at a fixed monthly budget point. No expensive infrastructure or FCC license is required. Get a demo today by visiting school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com. Yeah, so Ryan, the other big piece of technology, which is exclusive to Bluebird for a piece of time, which I've been given the unofficial time frame, which was airbags on school buses, right? First ever. We've not seen it. Britton talked a little bit on the interview because I had asked specifically, how does this impact Microbird? And he said, well, remember, these are built on Ford and GM chassis, which already have airbags on them. So this is strictly to big bus, but in that kind of conversation of the airbag, he said, this makes a lot of sense to protect the driver. And again, in that crash test demonstration, they fired off the airbag and the driver remained in the position. And in the slow-mo of this airbag deploying, it was milliseconds. It was so fast that this deployed and the driver remained in position, in control. They were protected. They talked about the safety implications of what an airbag does, specifically on a school bus versus a passenger car. And again, it's head protection, sternum protection. And to me, this is even a bigger reason for drivers to get excited because now they're protected even more. And everybody talks about the kids' protection, but we don't really talk a ton about driver protection. So here is an OEM taking steps to advance the safety of the cabin in the case of a frontal crash. And, I'm not sure, Ryan, how many crashes are happening out there where an airbag would be deployed. But obviously, they've got to set some sensors in the bus to be able to determine the severity of the crash for an airbag to deploy, right? We see that in passenger cars, but at what level, how extreme does it need to be for an airbag to deploy within a school bus?
Yeah, well,
and what's the cost, right? Once it deploys, you got to change out the steering wheel and put a new one on too, right?
Exactly. And they mentioned that there are sensors. So they talk about that. And these are, essentially frontal crashes, severe frontal crashes. Again, what's severe? I would gather that it's probably anything higher than 30, 35 miles per hour, maybe even 25. But one of the things that we often see is when school bus drivers are killed in these crashes, and we have several school bus drivers nationwide that are killed a year. We report on these just alongside the students that are killed. So a small number, but it does happen. And, whether it's a type C conventional, a lot of folks prefer type Cs for their drivers specifically because there's more cushion area. If there's a frontal crash, that front engine compartment is going to take the brunt of it before it reaches the driver. One of the reasons why some people are scared of type D transit style because the driver's right there, and some of the deaths we see are when there's a head-on collision and that driver just takes the brunt of it. So something like an airbag deploying at the driver position, that would help them immensely. So certainly a big aspect to this that can't be ignored. And like you said, Tony, I'm sure there's a lot of drivers that are taking a double take, and transportation directors, driver trainers, when they see this news, because anything that you can do to communicate to drivers, especially in this driver shortage that the industry is always tackling, always dealing with, but certainly over the last couple of years, it's been the worst in recent memory. that, you can use that as a tool to say, hey, we're doing the utmost to protect you if you come and work for us.
Yeah, safety first, Ryan. We see that in a lot of our surveys when we go to our conferences time and time again. I know we talk about energy and electric school buses to ad nauseum, guys, but guess what? At the end of the day, safety is number one. Transporting the kids, getting there safe, getting your drivers there safe. That's always paramount. That's mission driven, right? We're a mission driven industry, and mission number one is keep them safe. Get them to and from school and keep them safe. So it's really great seeing an OEM like Bluebird make this decision, take a leap. It is unprecedented and really exciting to see.
Absolutely. And, additionally, there were some other announcements made. So Bluebird is adding high resolution front and rear cameras to their buses. Also, high intensity LED lighting on the outside and inside of the bus. That includes the lighted stop arms, illuminated school bus signs at the front of the bus, strobe lights, and something that we had talked about, Tony, when we were trying to prognosticate what the announcement was going to be made, collision mitigation. So Bluebird had been the only OEM, major OEM anyways, large school buses, not to have a collision mitigation system. They had electronic stability control. I mentioned earlier they were the first adopter of that. But this announcement also included collision mitigation. So now across the three major brands, you can get collision mitigation systems with your new school bus.
Yeah, and I believe some of those technologies, that's the Mobileye Plus product. There's I think it's called Driver Shield. We had to check the name on that, but definitely it's a Mobileye product, and I know Roscoe Vision Systems sells that product, and we're starting to see it deployed out there on a limited basis. But it's not a cheap option, right? It's definitely an expensive option. But guys like IC Bus and Thomas have the large trucking sides of their business, which is Navistar and Daimler Truck North America, and those guys are way advanced on these type of technologies, and we can thank the trucking industry for the R&D for those safety technologies, because that has matriculated into IC Bus and Thomas built buses. Now, it's be curious to see again. There are a lot of newer OEMs like your Ride, BYDs, Green Powers, Lions. Where did they end up falling, and what are they going to do as a response to all this safety technology? Because their play has been a lot more energy driven, and now the narrative is kind of changed here substantially around safety, and how did they respond as well? So and we've got obviously our legacy OEMs, which would be IC Bus, Thomas, and Bluebird, which have been around forever. But there's a lot of new players, Ryan. So this will be a very curious thing as well for me to see how do the newer companies also engage, because it is a substantial cost to absorb putting seatbelts on all these buses. Now, as we've prognosticated with funding from the EPA, we have the heavy duty clean vehicle funding on deck, right? July 25th is the deadline for that, not far off. Another 620 plus million, 25 million. And then the states have funding. But when that funding goes away, who's carrying the cost burden? How is that? Is it being done creatively through finance? There's bridge financing. There's reverse leasing. We've really talked a lot about how do people finance this equipment, and what are they prioritizing in terms of their budgets. So, and we've seen the funding tables change significantly as well from the very first iteration of the clean school bus funding for ESBs out there, where they started out in the 400s and higher, where everybody said it's a free bus. Well, that has been, pared down significantly depending on where people are in terms of the free and reduced lunch group. If they're in a poverty level, right, they're getting a higher reimbursement, but still it doesn't cover the entire value of the vehicle.
No, it's incremental.
You start adding in more tech. Yeah, where you start adding more tech in, it adds more cost, right? And this is where does the rubber meet the road for customers out there? And Bluebird's interesting too, because obviously with Cummins making the announcement that they're not pursuing the propane engine, now Bluebird also has the propane engine exclusively for undetermined amount of time. I'm not sure if we'll see another propane engine.
Yeah, well, the agreement with Roush is through 2030 that they just inked earlier this year. So at least through 2030, it remains exclusive. A little surprising to me, actually, because we knew or saw the writing on the wall, what was going to happen with Cummins and propane. But certainly, yeah, if you want propane for the next 6 years, you have to buy a Bluebird, large bus anyway. So, and that's really the only option, even on the small side too. So, but you're right. We had this conversation during a Let's Talk session in Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, where you and I, Tony, were talking about all the grant funding and the incentives and the tax incentives and whatnot, the rebates, and what kind of technology could you adopt using that money just to get your feet wet. So a lot of the conversation has been like, oh, get your feet wet with electric, use some of this grant fund to play with it and get used to it because it's coming. Well, the same thing can be said about this technology. Certainly it's not a free bus anymore, but it is, I won't say free money because there are stipulations and you got to work for it and you got to apply and you got to prove yourself to get it. But this still continues to be unprecedented federal funding and will be for the next 2.5 years or so. Go out and get it. Because not only can it help you get electric school buses or perhaps propane, but we know that it's really focused on electric school buses. But this is a way that you can also get seatbelts, lap shoulder seatbelts. You can get collision mitigation systems. You can get these, advanced camera systems that Bluebird and others are now offering. So it's not simply the energy choice. It's also, again, safety first, Tony. We keep talking about safety. What can you do with this money to also move the needle in your operation to make the school bus even safer?
Yeah, the conversation will be interesting at STN Expo in Reno. I mean, we're 30 days out or less right now. And the conference is July 12th through the 17th out in Reno, Nevada. If you haven't registered yet, we do have a June 21st deadline to get in, get registered. The hotel room block is maximum capacity. We're filled. You can still book a room. Unfortunately, the discounted rates are disappearing quick as we run out of inventory, but the sessions look phenomenal, Ryan. I mean, we have so much good content. This only adds more fuel to the fire to debate the conversation. What are other OEMs going to do? What are the talking points going into Reno? I'm sure many customers and users are going to have questions regarding this and where do they fall, and what does this really mean for the end user in terms of how they proceed? And also, Ryan, I think it'll be interesting to see the actual adoption of the product, right? So if people are checking the box, no, I don't want it, what is their rationale? How are they going to justify that? Should, God forbid, there be an accident and now they have the opportunity to put this on their vehicle and they opted not to? That is pretty damning. So I don't know how that's going to look. What are the optics? I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, you're right. What we see in legal cases is juries, judges, they look at did you do everything possible to avoid this happening? Or to get out in front of it, your training, your vehicles, your maintenance, but certainly the technology. So you better believe that juries will and do look at seatbelts and in these crashes. Defense attorneys are experts at poking and prodding and, bringing up innuendo and insinuating things. And so if now you are a Bluebird customer and you bought a new school bus or school buses and you opted out of the lap shoulder belts, God forbid, one of those buses ends up getting in a horrific crash, and then it comes to light that there were no seatbelts on these buses, but there could have been. That's a tricky one. I mean, that's not looking good for the school district, to be quite frank. And it will be interesting to see if some folks who were on the fence or dead set against the seatbelts will now jump on board just from a litigation standpoint. Certainly, I would think that school district attorneys, if school districts have one, superintendents would be looking at this, going through this with a fine-tooth comb. And if not, they absolutely should be, because if they aren't, they're burying their heads in the sand. They absolutely need to take notice of this, because again, too, if the other OEMs follow suit and essentially one day down the road, every school bus that's manufactured comes with that standard, unless you opt out, and you do opt out, it's not going to end well for you in court.
Yeah, the element of safety will trump other things, right? It definitely comes down to public opinion. I know at the time of this recording, there was discussion that this is going to make national media headlines. Guys, if you maybe have seen it on the news, I would suspect this is going to really take a big hold on the country and really have a ripple effect well beyond our industry. Just looking at it, public opinion, it will matter. And that will obviously impact what districts do at local levels and the decisions they make. But obviously, this is a strategic advantage for Bluebird to offer something like this. And I can't imagine the other OEMs are going to let this go unchecked. From a business perspective, they have to look at it and say, hey, look, are we going to lose business? We need to maybe make this decision as well. And, the flip side is, you talked about public school districts. What about private fleet contractors, right? These contractors operate within the confines of the contract. And if the contract does not say seatbelts on buses, they don't put seatbelts on buses. And a lot of contractors are self-insured up to a certain point of catastrophic insurance. So does a contractor now, who they're a business, they have to look at all their pennies and dollars. How did they respond? Did they absolutely go ahead and start putting these on, because it is going to expose them to liability as well? So there are big implications here in the industry where we might really see a historic change in the position on seatbelts on school buses. And the airbag too, that is still, Ryan, I'm still wrapping my head around that one because Bluebird has an exclusive on this with IMI for 18 months, I was told at the event. At the time the actual product is ready for deployment, which I was told as well, airbags are going to be on Bluebird buses starting in October of 2025. So new Bluebird buses starting October 2025 will have airbags. And from that point, they have an 18-month exclusive on this technology. So technically, we wouldn't see other OEMs even being able to jump into this until early 2027. So that would be very interesting to me to see if that also makes an impact in people's purchase decision, or do the other OEMs look to other supply chain partners to develop this out? Obviously, on the consumer side, we saw Takata, which was owned by Syntec Seating at one point, and then IMMI acquired Syntec. But Takata in the consumer auto space went through a litany of lawsuits with airbag malfunctions in passenger cars, and it was horrible, right? And really kind of bankrupted the company. So I'm not sure who else is out there making airbags. Obviously, OEM car makers are still getting airbags for their cars from somewhere. So we'll see how it all plays out, Ryan.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are other truck steering wheel manufacturers, and they have the technology. It's just we haven't seen it in school buses now. But now that Bluebird opened that door, I think we will see that, and we're going to have customers out there asking their OEMs, if it's not Bluebird, saying, "Well, hey, what do you have for me on this?" And I would venture the guess that there probably are some school districts out there that already have some of these, but it's not something that we, frankly, we never really thought of, Tony. You kind of take things like that for granted because, we all have them in our passenger vehicles, but certainly it's not something to be taken for granted in school buses. But if you out there in the nation, if you have airbags in your steering wheels in your fleet, let us know. Email us, Ryan@stnonline.com, Tony@stnonline.com. We'd love to hear from you. But certainly it's, there's a sea change going on here in a lot of respects, from electric buses down to the safety element. It will really be interesting over the next year or so to see how this plays out. See as folks start purchasing these new Bluebirds with all the safety tech on there, the seatbelts and everything else. Will there be folks that were on the fence that go ahead and jump in with both feet? I think there will be some. There are people that go fighting and kicking and screaming to avoid it, certainly. But I always harken back when folks argue with me about lap shoulder belts, is that, I guess I tell them, I know you're dead set and you're giving me all the reasons why you don't want them. But I have more stories from folks who thought just like you, and then they drove them and they saw how they handled student behavior, how they stood up in crashes, and they changed their tune almost immediately. So it's one of those things. Folks fear change. It's just, that's human nature. And you have pre-existing notions on things, perspectives, misconceptions sometimes about how things work or don't work. And you make up your mind and you find the reasoning. You go out there and you seek out reasons or examples of what backs up your claim, and you ride and die with it until something forces you to change your mind. And just having a conversation over a cup of coffee, that's not going to change your mind. You have to live and breathe the technology. You have to see it firsthand. And, to a T, the folks that we've talked to and all these different stories we've done for the last, decade or more on the new generation of lap shoulder belts, all the arguments, they check the box and they reverse the pre-existing conception of everything. So, it's one of those things that now with Bluebird offering it, I'm thinking we're going to see some other OEMs do it. It will be interesting to see how folks react. And who knows, a decade from now, perhaps all new school buses will have lap shoulder belts on them. And there could be a flip in the opposition to them. Certainly we have a younger workforce coming in. We have a lot of folks that are nearing retirement who have retired, who have fought seatbelts. So it's, I think, again, over the next decade, we're going to see some big sea change in this respect.
Well, I can't wait to see everybody soon at STN Expo in Reno. Lots to discuss, lots to see. Guys, don't miss out. This technology is going to be available from Bluebird at the show, and really exciting stuff to see who launches what new products are there. It's always great to get everybody together and have a bigger conversation. So I think it will rage on, Ryan. We'll see how it all plays out. But so glad you joined us on the podcast today. Again, guys, don't forget STN Expo, July 12th through the 17th, stnexpo.com/west to sign up. We have our standard registration going right now, good until June 21st. So do not wait any longer. Get registered, stnexpo.com/west. And guys, also remember, this podcast brought to you by TransFinder, School Radio, and Bluebird. And we're so happy that everybody came listen today. We had lots to talk about. stnonline.com for all the latest news and updates. Don't forget, you can listen to this pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to pods. Have a great week, nation. We'll see you soon in Reno. We love you.